Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and we continue our series on projecting the top 12 at each position. And today, we're all about the running backs, baby. You know how much I love the running backs. We are going to talk about it extensively today, especially a couple of guys that we continue to get pushback on time after time after time. So you are not going to want to go anywhere. This is going to be one heck of a video. Before we jump into all the good information, though, just got to remind you all that we are working with our friends over at Manscaped again this season. If you go to manscaped.com and use code Headliners, you are going to get 20% off and free shipping for your entire order. Who doesn't love free shipping, and who doesn't love 20% off, right? Go over there, manscaped.com, code word Headliners, and you are going to get 20% off and free shipping. Appreciate Manscaped being our main sponsor again this season. And let's go ahead and bring it up right now. Let's get the projection builder up with our friends at Run the Sims once again. If you've seen the other two videos talking about quarterbacks and wide receivers, this is going to look a lot of the same. We're going to be taking a look at the same things, going through some different methodologies, moving some numbers back and forth, and really trying to determine where people are going to land this season. Hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget as well, we're giving away a free Austin Ekeler jersey right now. Jake's video yesterday, oh man, it was a good one, talking about some of the most hated players in fantasy football. All the deets are right in there on how you can win that signed Austin Ekeler jersey. Let's roll it on over here, ladies and gentlemen, though. And here we go. Everything in right now is based on Run the Sims projections. So this is all based on Run the Sims projections and what they currently have in the system. Very interesting to note that since Jameis Winston was made the starter, Alvin Kamara bumped all the way up to the RB1 in half PPR. Wow. They love themselves some Alvin Kamara this year. Don't know if I can argue it. I ended up moving him up to my running back 3. So running back 1 there. Alvin Kamara, I moved him up all the way to my running back 3 recently. But they've got Kamara at 1, Christian McCaffrey at 2, Derrick Henry at 3, Dalvin Cook, the RB4, then Ekeler, Elliott, Aaron Jones, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Chris Carson, Jonathan Taylor, and DeAndre Swift right outside the top 12. Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, Antonio Gibson, David Montgomery, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Damian Harris, Miles Sanders, Mike Davis, J.K. Dobbins, and Josh Jacobs, with Raheem Mostert and James Conner finishing it out. So once again, I'm not here to argue about the projections that Run the Sims has in here. Pat Mayo, Justin Freeman, really, really good guys over there. Lots of good information in here. I got to say I disagree with some of it, though. And the first one I'm going to disagree with is Nick Chubb being outside the top 12. Let's go to inputs by team. Let's go to Cleveland, and let's take a look at what they've got here in the system for their running backs. Nick Chubb right now, they're giving him a 59% market share on the ground, averaging 5.2 yards per carry, and a TD market share of 60.2%. Market share of 4% with 8 yards per reception, and a TD market share of 3.8%. So even with saying that Nick Chubb is going to be running back 13, Kareem Hunt, giving a majority of the workload here and a little bit on the ground, only comes in at RB27 in a half PPR format. The rush rate is sitting right at 45 right now, plays 994.2. That, I think, could go up a little bit. We'll talk about that more than a minute. Touchdowns at 51, rush rate percentage at 40. Now, going back to the projections here real quick, let's take a look at the numbers that Nick Chubb has and whether or not we think that he can get those. 264 rushing attempts, 1,382 rushing yards, 12.5 touchdowns, 130 yards on the ground, and 1.2 touchdowns. So let's go up here. So they're saying essentially 1,300 yards on the ground, 12 touchdowns, 264 rushing attempts. Let's go back to the team here and take a quick look at this. So me personally, I think that they are going to run more plays this year. I think 994 is a little too much. And the reason that I think that is because the offense, I think, another step forward this year, but also on top of it, their defense, I think, is going to get the ball to them a lot. So it's not the typical like high-paced offense that you would see where they're running play after play after play after play, but I believe it's going to be an offense that's going to get the ball more and more and more often because of how good the defense will be. So I'm actually going to bump this up, and I'm going to go with 1,050 plays this season, if I can get it in here. Whew, not quick enough. There we go. Got it. Got it. So I went with 1,050 plays this season. Kept the rushing market share, or the rushing percentage at 45%. But will they end up... I think they're going to run it more this season. I think this is going to be a team that's going to be almost dead split even. So I'm going to go a little bit higher at 47% here. Keep the touchdowns and the rushing TD rate the same. So what does that do with Nick Chubb? Well, that does bump him up to RB11. We're going to go take a look at the projections. Now it's got him at 291 attempts, 1,525 yards, 12 touchdowns, and then obviously in the passing game, not seeing a whole lot in the passing game. 12 touchdowns for me, though, honestly, I think it's a little low because I think he's going to get a majority of the rushing touchdowns not only at the goal line, but he's going to see he can touch the ball from anywhere on the field and score. We have seen that from him already. So I do want to give him just a little bit more in terms of the market share for touchdowns. Right now, the rushing touchdowns, he's getting 60.2%. I want to give him a little bit more though, okay? I'm going to go with 70% of the rushing touchdowns. I'm going to take a few away from Baker Mayfield. I just don't think Baker Mayfield is going to be running the ball in too often. So I'm going to go with a 10% there. There we go. And then I'm going to take 4 away from Kareem Hunt. And I am going to go, if I can get it right, I can go with 16 there. Oh, and I got to go with 0.7. Back. Boop, boop. There we go. 16.7. That puts us at 100%. So where does that bump Nick Chubb up to? Running back 10. All right. Projections by position. Running back 10, Nick Chubb. 291 rushing attempts, 1,525 yards, 14.5 touchdowns. So listen. Obviously, right there, we're kind of talking about right now where he could finish. Now, it also depends on some of these guys ahead of him. What happens, right? As some of these guys start to fall back, Nick Chubb starts to move up if that happens. I do think right now that he can finish above Joe Mixon. If for some reason Saquon Barkley misses some time, I think he's gonna finish above Saquon Barkley. I do have him barely above Aaron Jones. I do think he can finish above Ezekiel Elliott because I think 287 rushing attempts, especially with that offense, and 13 rushing touchdowns is a little bit out of the question. Let's take a look at that real quick. Let's go to Dallas, knowing that Dallas is going to have to throw the ball an awful lot. Right now, their rush rate is at 44%. The other day, I talked about that. I tuned that down back to 40% because I just don't think they're going to run the ball as often. What does that do to Ezekiel Elliott? Well, that takes him back to running back 6 a little bit there. TD rush rate at 31%. I don't mind that. Yeah, he'll get a majority there. 60% market share. Yep, 100%. But 12% share in the receiving, I don't think he's going to see that much. I don't think we're going to see nearly as much as maybe what we had in the past. So I'm going to take 2% away from him there, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bump it down here to CeeDee Lamb to make sure we stay at 100. Now you're taking Ezekiel Elliott, still at RB6 right now. What if those yards per carry go down, right? That's something that we probably need to be careful of. What if that rush rate percentage goes down? They're going to have to throw it more and more and more often. So Zeke does fall a little bit. Now when you look at the difference here, we're looking at a difference of only just over 20 points. Not even that. Under 20 points. Just under 20 points. 19 points between Chubb and Elliott there. That's just a couple of touchdowns. That's a couple of touchdowns that could go away from Ezekiel Elliott. If we go back to the teams here and we see the rush TD rate at 35%, what if I drop that down to a 33%? Now, where does that pull? That pulls Ezekiel Elliott all the way back to RB9. So essentially saying with Ezekiel Elliott, if he loses 2 extra touchdowns, that pulls him back to RB9. And now the difference between him and Nick Chubb is 10 points. So again, as I've talked about within a lot of my videos, that's how quickly things can change for all of these. So it's not necessarily, I don't think Nick Chubb can get here. Obviously, if he gets here and this is his ceiling, he's still going to be RB9, RB8, something like that. I'm just projecting that some of the numbers that these guys are going to finish with could potentially end up being lower. Nick Chubb is my RB5 now because I've got Cook, I've got CMC, I've got Alvin Kamara, I've got Henry, and then I've got Nick Chubb at number 5. So obviously we would say this dude would have to stay healthy. If he stays healthy though, there's no way that he doesn't hit these numbers. So is 5 a little on the high side? Probably, but it's not on the high side if you look how some of these other numbers could fall here as well. I mean, Joe Mixon, if he got 1,119 yards, 10 touchdowns, would you be happy with that in the end of the second round? Yeah, you would be, 100%. I know a lot of you don't like Joe Mixon, but if that is not out of the ballpark for him, then he's a banger of a second-round pick. So with Nick Chubb, yeah, we got to keep an eye on it. Obviously, that's what people are worried about is that Nick Chubb. But this whole discussion of you don't draft Nick Chubb in the first round because he doesn't have the upside, we basically just talked about best case and worst case scenario with Nick Chubb, and it's right at the end of that RB1 status. Again, I've got his numbers a little bit higher than what Run the Sims does, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They have a killer defense. They're going to run the ball a lot. It's going to be Nick Chubb getting the majority of those carries. I've got no problem with Chubb in that range. Let's talk about Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry is another one that continues to come up by people. And the argument that after you run for 2,000 yards, the fall off is real. It's not, ladies and gentlemen. Derrick Henry is far different than any other running back in the league that has run for 2,000 yards and been unsuccessful the following year. I did a video of it on my must-have running back video of Derrick Henry a couple months ago. It's a fallacy. It's not true. There is nothing to correlate Derrick Henry to the other running backs that ran for 2,000 yards. So right now, he's got a 74% market share on the ground, a 5-yard per carry average, and TD market share of 74% on the ground. These yards per carry, I'm actually going to bump it up a little bit because when you've got Julio Jones and A.J. Brown on the outside, you're not going to be stacking a whole lot of boxes. And their rush rate at 47%, I'm feeling that. I get it. I've got nothing wrong. I've got no problem with all these. So right now, he's coming in as the RB3. And that's if you're saying 359 rushing attempts, 1,977 yards, and 17 touchdowns. Okay? Again, he's not getting really anything in the receiving game here. We know that. But all the rest of this, Kyle, what if it comes? Okay, let's talk about it. What if the rushing comes down a little bit? What if the rushing market share, let's take it all the way down to 70%, and let's give another 4% just for shits and giggles to Brian Hill. What does that do? Well, it still leaves Derrick Henry at RB3 status. And that's with pulling him down to 340 rushing attempts, 1,870 yards, and 17 touchdowns. Okay? What if you want to pull it down further? What if you say, Kyle, that's still not good enough? I think he runs for even less than that. Let's pull it another 5% down. We're going to give 5 more to Darrynton Evans. Just to make an argument. He stays at RB3 with 315 attempts, 1,736 rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns. What if you say, Kyle, I don't think they're going to have that many rushing touchdowns. Okay, let's pull it down to 40%. Not 4, that would be bad. Let's pull it down to 40%. It only bumps him back to RB4. That would be Derrick Henry. 1,700 receiving yards, or 1,700 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. I'm literally trying to take as many touches away from Derrick Henry. I'm literally trying to take as many other stats away from Derrick Henry as possible, and the dude isn't falling. It's not falling. What if we bump his percentage down even further? Let's go back to this. If you said, Kyle, that was way too much. Okay, that's RB5 right there. That's still 1,578 yards on 315 attempts. In the first round, if you pick Derrick Henry at the beginning of the first and you get RB5 numbers out of him, are you really going to be that upset? I don't think so. Let's do it even more. Where else do we need to go to get more attempts away from Derrick Henry? Again, I'm just going to give 2 more to Brian Hill, and I'm going to give 2 more to Darrington Evans, and I'm going to give another 1 here. Make it 5. Make it 5% for Jeremy McNichols. Where's Derrick Henry? He's still the RB5. 291 attempts. 1,450. I'm literally trying to take as much market share and as much opportunity away from Derrick Henry as possible, and he is still a top 5 running back. If Derrick Henry plays 15 to 17 games this season, if he plays 16, if he's healthy for an entire season, this is a dude that when he plays will be a top 5 running back. The only way that he finishes outside the top 5 is if he misses significant time. And again, there is absolutely nothing in his injury profile to even say that this is a guy that's going to start breaking down. He is much different than a lot of the other running backs who hit 2,000 yards. He's much younger than a majority of the running backs at the time in which they hit 2,000 yards. He has less wear and tear than what a majority of those people. Don't forget, his first 2 seasons in the league, he didn't get very many touches. He just didn't. DeMarco Murray was there with Tennessee. So he is completely different than everybody else. I am not skipping on Derrick Henry at all. Austin Ekeler is an interesting one here because a lot of people get worried about him because what he does. I mean, even what they've got him getting 221 carries on the ground for 1,050 yards. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's go to LA here. Wrong team. LA here. And let's talk about that for a second. Austin Ekeler, we're saying he's getting a 50% market share on the ground, 4.7 yards per carry, 45 of the touchdowns on the ground. Let's go ahead and start bumping it back a little bit to see what happens with Austin Ekeler. We're going to let's give 3% here. Nope, I did it wrong. Hold on. We got to go way back. We got to dial it back here, Kyle. We got to dial it back here. For Justin Jackson. I'm breaking it. There we go. I'm still over. 14%. Come on, Kyle. I can't count. It's okay. So, we backed the market share off to 40.5%. It still left him as an RB2 or an RB4 here. Market share, let's back the market share down as well. And let's say that Joshua Kelly gets 5% to make it 14 overall. That's still going to leave Austin Ekeler right there at RB4. So that now we've got him with under 200 rushing attempts, which I think is a little bit better in line with a guy like Alvin Kamara and what we've seen with him do in the past. For here with Alvin Kamara, they're projecting basically this guy goes off the rails this year with 230 rushing attempts. I don't know if we see him used any differently than what we have in the past. But with Austin Ekeler, now we've pulled Ekeler underneath 200 rushing attempts, underneath 1,000 yards, 7.3 touchdowns. But if the dude gets 104 targets and gets around 800 yards, he's still going to be a guy in half PPR leagues. That is, what do we got here? 294 points. That's insanity. So when you look at it, again, if you're a guy like I'm off Austin Ekeler because he doesn't get enough touches, he's basically what Alvin Kamara has been doing the last few years, where give him just under 200 rushing attempts, let him make a significant contribution in the passing game, and now you got a guy that's balling out on a consistent basis. You've got to look at Austin Ekeler and say, hey, definitely a guy that has mid RB1 upside. Let's talk about guys that you have a lot of questions on right now. So let's go down to what do they got on my boy Darrell Henderson here? Here he comes in. So they've got him at RB 26 right now. 167 rushing attempts for 733 yards, 7 touchdowns on the season, 26 receptions for 252 yards. I think that changes. I don't see how Sony Michel gets all of those touches this season. So let's take a quick peek at what we've got going on here. They've got Sony Michel now at RB30. Let's see what this looks like here. 40% market share for Henderson, 37% market share for Sony Michel. I don't see that. I don't see that. I definitely see a much larger percentage of the touches going to Darrell Henderson. So for me personally, I got to give him more like 45%, and I'm going to take a couple of percentage points away from there, and then I'm going to take this and knock it down to 2 for Jake Funk. So now we're looking at like RB25 for Darrell Henderson, 4.2 yards, and they're basically saying these guys are getting the same there, but the market share of receptions, I really feel like that's going to end up being a lot higher. Like a guy like Van Jefferson, I think Darrell Henderson could end up getting more looks than what he could, just because of what Darrell Henderson has done in the past in the passing game, which I've talked about those numbers quite a bit. You know, if we bump him up to an 11% market share, now we're looking at RB. Where'd he go? There he is. RB18 right there. And that's saying 824 rushing yards on the ground with 188 rushing attempts, and then 48 receptions for 462 yards. We also know that he's been really good after the catch in the passing game at times as well. So what do we got here? 9.6 yards per reception. I mean, Cam Akers last year got more yards per reception than what Darrell Henderson did, but it's because Darrell Henderson was used as a pass catcher behind the line, where Cam Akers was used as a pass catcher past the line of scrimmage. So for this, I'm going to bump this up to 13%. I'm going to go 13 yards per reception. I'm going to go 13 yards per reception. So then that puts him in that RB15 range, because now we're looking at 625 receiving yards. I think that's a little bit more realistic. If he stays healthy and he plays well, this 188 rushing attempts, I think it gets a little bit closer to 200, but I think this is being pretty generous with Darrell Henderson right now. I think this is pretty on board with what we'll end up seeing, and I don't have an issue with that. The question isn't, for me, is he going to get more work than Sony Michel? Are they just going to use the running back position as much as what other teams potentially would? Josh Jacobs all the way down at RB23, 228 attempts. We'll go check him real quick because I know a lot of people are interested in him right now. Scroll down. So they've got him at RB23. Kenyon Drake. So they're even giving 51% of the touches on the ground to Josh Jacobs, 4.3 yards per carry, which with that offensive line, I think that's about in the ballpark. They're giving him almost 60% of the game, the passing or the running on the ground. Market share, they're really not giving that much of a market share to Kenyon Drake anyway, and they're still only saying, hey, in a half PPR league, he's like an RB23 at best. So a lot of you that are arguing in favor of Josh Jacobs, even here, seeing that Kenyon Drake isn't really even getting that much of a workload, that's still how bad that hurts Josh Jacobs, that it pushes him down that far. What about our man James Robinson? Where does James Robinson stand right now? We'll see if it's been updated. They've got him at RB30. So let me scroll down to Jax right here. Scroll down again. James Robinson. So they're giving him a 45% market share. They're giving Carlos Hyde 26%. They're giving James Robinson 32% on the ground, and they're taking away quite a bit of work in the passing game, which you had to assume that was going to happen, right? I mean, I don't think any of us thought that he was going to be a big-time producer in the passing game. Sorry, I had to wet the whistle real quick. A lot of talking. Dry mouth. So for market share on the ground, his rushing attempts or his rushing yards, I'm going to bump that up. I'm going to bump that up to 50. I just don't see... Do I see Carlos Hyde being there this year and helping out? Yeah, sure. Sure I do. He knows the Urban Meyer system. He's been there. but I can't imagine that Urban Meyer is going to rely on Carlos Hyde that much. So that pushes James Robinson up to RB29. So when we look at the projections by position and we find James Robinson, RB29, we're essentially saying right now he's only going to score 3 touchdowns on the ground. That's where it's going to come into play. This is going to be the number that really boosts James Robinson up. The dude, based on these projections, could run for darn near 1,000 yards, but because he's not scoring on the ground or in the air, he's going to finish all the way down at RB29. So realistically, for him to get there, they're saying they're going to have a rush TD rate of only 35%. All right, so they're going to be saying that they're going to score a majority of their touchdowns through the air. Don't necessarily disagree with that, right? They've got Trevor Lawrence. They're going to throw the ball. I don't think Carlos Hyde is going to get 29%, though, right? Let's bump this up to 35%, and let's take 3% away from Carlos Hyde. Now, that gets us right still at that 29% mark. We're going to have to see, or that RB29 mark. We're going to have to see even more. Like, we're going to have to see 6% taken away. We're going to have to see him come all the way up to 41%. And, man, even then, we're only talking about still RB28 with, where's it got him at? RB28 with 5 touchdowns. The team overall would have to score a lot more on the ground. So this rushing TD rate would likely need to come up to like 40. And even then, we're only at RB27. So I know a lot of you this offseason were like, Kyle, how can you do your boy James Robinson like that? And I've got James Robinson a little bit higher up as RB2, but man, maybe I'm too high on him. Maybe I'm too high on James Robinson because even now at 5 point, I mean, he's going to have to get probably 10 touchdowns to get himself up into high RB2 status. So we probably would have to take another 10% away here and essentially give, and even then we're only getting to RB26. What we're saying right now with only 34.5 touchdowns is that James Robinson isn't going to score a whole lot this year because Jacksonville isn't going to score a whole lot. So I just gave him 40 touchdowns, and that got him up to RB25, which will give him 8.4 touchdowns on the season. So, man, it's tough. Just the upside there with James Robinson and that offense, and what will that offense look like, and will they be able to stay on the field, and are they going to be behind so much that they're going to end up throwing it more? There's a lot to digest there. One other one I want to take a look at, Mike Davis coming in at RB21. I like this ranking for Mike Davis. I've got him as a must-have. They're saying 225 attempts, 879 rushing yards on the ground, 7.7 touchdowns. Give me that as my RB3 all day long. If you go really wide receiver heavy and you get him as your RB2, not bad, but you're going to have somebody there for a little bit of upside. Mike Davis probably is going to offer absolutely no upside this year, but he's going to be really, really safe. He's going to get touches. He's going to score some touchdowns. He's going to be a guy that's going to get work. And there's nobody there really battling him to take any of that away. Damian Harris, after the trade by Run the Sims, is all the way up to an RB19 status. Antonio Gibson is interesting that they've got Antonio Gibson so low. Let's go take a look here. Rush TD rate of 42%, 1,045 plays, 42 rush rate, 47.4 touchdowns. We got RB16, it looks like, for Antonio Gibson. That puts his stats, we're talking 241 rushing attempts, 1,129 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So there's only saying 238 receiving yards. I am not a big fan of J.D. McKissic is going to get a ton of work this year. Let's go ahead and switch these numbers. Let's switch this to 7%, which is what Antonio Gibson is right now. And let's switch this to 10%, which is what J.D. McKissic was. Well, that's going to give us RB13 right there. That's going to bring Antonio Gibson up to 340 receiving yards. That might be a little bit on the lower side. What are they giving him? They're giving him only 6.9 yards per reception. Let's bump him up a little bit to 7. That's going to still keep him right in that RB13 range. And they're saying J.D. McKissic is going to get more touchdowns through the air. I also don't agree with that. So let's change these numbers around. Let's make it 7.9. There we go. Let's make it 7.9. And this one for J.D. McKissick was a 4.3. Okay. So that's going to get Antonio Gibson up to RB12. That's going to put him with, it's only going to give him 2 touchdowns, it looks like, through the air. So not a whole lot there. Not a whole lot. But listen, RB12, if you're thinking he's going to run for over 1,000 yards, it's going to be the passing game. So for him to get any further up than this low RB1 status, you're going to have to anticipate Antonio Gibson getting at least more than 500 receiving yards. So if you do that, then you can say, yeah, Antonio Gibson is going to go a lot higher than that. But again, that's what these videos were all about. We use these videos, or I wanted to use these videos, so you could see the raw data, the hard numbers as I talked about, guys, and you see where they were at. The projections that are in here right now are based on Run the Sims, but if you make an account over there and sign up for their plan, you can go in and manipulate these numbers, and you can change things, and you can say, well, I don't think he's going to do this, right? And this is a great way. This is a great way to really blueprint in your mind, what does somebody need to get to a certain level? So if you say to yourself, there's no way Antonio Gibson gets 500 receiving yards this year, there's probably no way in the world that Antonio Gibson finishes higher than RB 11, 10, maybe 9. Okay? If you think he's going to get less than 12 touchdowns total on the season, there's no way he finishes here. If you think he's going to get more than 12 touchdowns on the season, he definitely could move up the board rather quickly. So this really, in your mind, kind of takes back, and all the information that you hear from us that's really just talking about some deep diving stats, situations, and things like that. Now you get to see the actual numbers in place and what would have to happen for certain guys for them to reach certain levels. Headliner Nation, love it, right? Absolutely love it. Love Run the Sims. A lot that you can do over there. Again, you can head over to runthesims.com and create an account right now. It's really going to help take your game to the next level. If you're here, though, right now, you got to like the video. You got to subscribe if you're new. And in the comments down below, let me know, is there anybody I didn't touch on that you'd be interested in hearing more about? Is there anything that you saw that just seemed out of sorts to you, or anything you disagreed with, or whatever? Let me know down in the comments below. We'll talk about it much more often. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to end this video. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Yeah. Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle